The silent cradle. I always thought parenting would be the happiest time of my life. They tell you about the sleepless nights, the endless crying, the diapers, but no one warns you about the fear. The deep, suffocating fear that settles into your bones the moment you realize you're responsible for a life so small, so fragile. It started with the crying. Lily was always a fussy baby. Claire and I would take turns rocking her through the night, her tiny body wriggling against our chests. But there was one night 3 weeks after we brought her home when the crying stopped. Not a slow, exhausted wail fading into sleep. It just stopped. I woke up first. The silence gnawed at me, chewing through the haze of sleep. I crept down the hall, heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the crib, I found Lily lying perfectly still, eyes wide open. Her little chest rose and fell, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't even blinking. I whispered her name, but she didn't react. Not until I touched her. Then she blinked and started crying again. Loud, piercing wails that echoed through the room. I chalked it up to exhaustion, to paranoia, but Claire noticed it too. Lily would stare at the ceiling for hours, her eyes tracking something we couldn't see. Then the baby monitor started acting up. I'd hear whispers, soft, lilting voices just beneath the static. I tried to convince myself it was interference, a neighbor's cordless phone or a distant radio station. But the voices weren't random. They were speaking to Lily, calling her name. Claire refused to hear it. She buried herself in the routine, feeding, changing, napping, while I sat up at night, staring at the monitor, listening. It got worse. The whispers became clearer. They started saying things they couldn't possibly know. She's hungry. She's cold. Don't let him touch her. I stopped sleeping altogether. I'd sit outside Lily's room, watching the shadows pool in the corners. Sometimes I'd hear the rocking chair creak, just once, like someone testing its weight. Claire was slipping away from me, too tired to notice the way Lily would smile at the empty air, the way her little hands would reach up, like she was trying to grasp something just out of sight. I tried to catch it on camera. I set up an old baby monitor with a recording feature, leaving it running through the night. The next morning, I checked the footage. For the first 5 hours, nothing happened. Just Lily sleeping in her crib. But at exactly 3:14 a.m., the rocking chair began to move. Slowly, back and forth. And in the shadows by the closet, I saw something darker than the night itself. I stood there, watching. It wasn't until the chair stopped that Lily opened her eyes. I showed the footage to Claire, but she refused to watch. She accused me of doctoring it, of losing my mind. Couldn't blame her. It sounded crazy. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow. The voices kept coming. She's ours. Not much longer. We're waiting. I couldn't take it anymore. One night, I sat in the nursery with Lily asleep in her crib, the knife clutched in my hand. The monitor crackled beside me, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. Hours passed in the heavy silence. At 3:14 a.m., the chair began to rock. I stood, heart pounding. The air in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. My eyes locked onto the closet door. Creaked open just an inch, but enough to see that terrible blackness inside. The knife trembled in my grip. Then Lily giggled. Not a baby's gurgling laugh, but something older, something knowing. I ran to the crib, snatching her up in my arms. The closet door slammed shut, the chair stopped rocking, and the whispers died out. I stood there in the suffocating dark, holding my daughter so tightly I thought I might crush her. We moved out the next day. Claire thinks I had some kind of breakdown, but she doesn't ask questions. I don't offer answers. Lily is 3 now. She still wakes up at 3:14 every night, giggling in the dark. And sometimes, when I pass by her room, I hear the chair creaking. Whispers in the crib. I never thought parenting would be easy, but I never expected it to be terrifying. When my wife, Claire, and I brought our newborn son, Oliver, home, we were overwhelmed with joy. The nursery was perfect, painted soft blue with stuffed animals neatly arranged in his crib. Every parent worries, but my concerns grew into something unnatural. It started with the baby monitor. Late at night, when the house was silent except for Oliver's breathing, I would hear faint whispers through the monitor. At first, I assumed it was interference, our neighbors' voices bleeding through the cheap signal. But then I noticed something disturbing. The whispers weren't random. They were calling his name. Ali. The first time I heard it, I bolted upright in bed, my pulse pounding. Claire stirred beside me, but she didn't wake. I grabbed the monitor, staring at the grainy night vision screen. Oliver lay still in his crib, his tiny chest rising and falling. Nothing else. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, but the whispers didn't stop. One night, as I listened, the voice grew clearer. "He's ours now." My blood ran cold. I rushed to Oliver's room, throwing the door open. The air was thick with something sour, rotten. The rocking chair by the crib creaked, moving ever so slightly. I stood frozen, heart hammering. Oliver slept peacefully. Claire dismissed my concerns. "You're sleep-deprived," she said, rubbing my back. "Your mind's playing tricks on you." But then, she started hearing it too. One evening, while I was at work, she called me, her voice trembling. "There's someone in Oliver's room." I sped home, breaking every speed limit. When I burst into the nursery, Claire stood there, shaking, clutching Oliver to her chest. The rocking chair was still swaying. "I saw it," she whispered. She described a shadow, tall, thin, with hollow eyes, standing over Oliver's crib. It had vanished the moment she stepped inside. I wanted to believe it was postpartum exhaustion, but deep down, I knew better. That night, I set up cameras in the nursery. I was determined to catch whatever was tormenting us. Hours passed as I watched the live feed on my phone, eyes growing heavy. At 3:12 a.m., the crib moved. Not a lot, just an inch. Then something shifted in the corner. A darkness, deeper than shadows. It slithered closer to the crib, a skeletal hand reaching out. I bolted out of bed and sprinted to the nursery. The air was suffocating, the smell unbearable. The crib was empty. Oliver was gone. Claire screamed. We tore the room apart, searching for him. The baby monitor crackled. "Down here." The voice slithered through the static. My stomach twisted as I turned toward the closet. Slowly, I pulled open the door. Oliver lay inside, silent, wide-eyed, completely unharmed. But he wasn't alone. In the dim glow of the nightlight, I saw something crouched in the corner. A grotesque figure with sunken eyes and an elongated grin. His head tilted unnaturally, studying me. Then, in a blink, it was gone, fading into the darkness like smoke. We fled the house that night, never looking back. Oliver is safe now, but sometimes when the baby monitor is on, I still hear it. Ali. The whispering cradle. I never considered myself a superstitious person. Ghost stories were for campfires, horror movies were just entertainment, and strange occurrences had logical explanations. But parenting changes you. It makes you more protective, more cautious, more aware of the small things you'd otherwise ignore. Like the whispers in my baby's room. It started a few weeks after we brought our daughter, Lily, home from the hospital. She was a quiet baby, rarely cried, but something about the nursery always felt off. At first, I thought it was just the usual paranoia of being a new parent, checking on her every few minutes, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, ensuring she was still breathing. But then, I started noticing small things I couldn't explain. The mobile above her crib would be spinning on its own, even when the window was shut tight. The baby monitor would pick up faint rustling sounds when Lily was sound asleep. And then there were the whispers, soft, faint, indistinct. At first, I thought it was interference. Maybe a neighbor's baby monitor or some weird frequency messing with our system. But one night, as I rocked Lily to sleep in the dim glow of the nightlight, I heard it, clear as day. A voice, right next to my ear. "Shoo! Don't wake her." I froze. My blood turned to ice. I whipped my head around, but the nursery was empty. Just me and Lily, Her tiny fingers curled around the edge of her blanket. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I scanned the room. The baby monitor crackled with static before falling silent. I convinced myself I was sleep-deprived. That was logical, right? New parents don't sleep. We hallucinate. We imagine things. That's what I told myself, until I saw the crib move. It was subtle, a slow, almost imperceptible rocking, like a mother soothing her child. But my hands weren't on it. I was standing by the door, frozen in place, watching as an unseen force lulled my daughter back to sleep. The moment I stepped forward, the movement stopped. I barely slept that night. Something else in the house. I didn't tell my wife, Claire, right away. I didn't want to scare her. But over the next few days, more things started happening. I'd find Lily's blankets neatly adjusted, tucked in a way neither Claire nor I remembered doing. The mobile would play its soft lullaby on its own. And every now and then, the baby monitor would catch faint, rhythmic shushing. It wasn't until one night, when I stayed up late in the living room, that I heard Claire's voice coming from the baby monitor. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's here." A rush of warmth spread through me. Claire must have woken up to check on Lily. I smiled, about to turn off the monitor, when I heard our bedroom door creak open. I turned. Claire stepped out, groggy, rubbing her eyes. "Why is Lily crying?" she mumbled. I felt my stomach drop. I grabbed the monitor and stared at it, my hands trembling. The soft humming lullaby, the gentle cooing, it wasn't Claire. We ran to the nursery together. The room was still. Lily was fast asleep, her little chest rising and falling peacefully. The air felt thick, like something unseen had just been there, watching us. Claire was silent for a long time. Then, finally, she whispered, "I think someone is in the house." The old lullaby. We installed cameras the next day. I wanted proof, either to confirm my worst fears or prove I was losing my mind. For a while, nothing happened. A few nights passed in uneasy silence. Then, on the fourth night, I woke up to the sound of the baby monitor playing a lullaby I had never heard before. A slow, eerie melody, like something from an old music box. It made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and checked the nursery camera feed. First, there was nothing, just Lily sleeping soundly in her crib. Then, in the far right corner of the room, a shadow moved. A tall, thin figure, almost blending into the darkness. Watching her, it didn't move like a person. It didn't step forward or shift. It just glided closer and closer to the crib. I bolted out of bed and ran down the hall. By the time I reached the nursery, the room was empty. No shadow, no sound, just Lily still fast asleep. But her crib was rocking, the mother in the shadows. I wanted to leave the house. I begged Claire to take Lily and go to a hotel, just for a night, while I figured things out. But Claire, always the rational one, insisted it was stress, sleep deprivation, postpartum paranoia. So I stayed up that night, watching the monitor, listening. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the lullaby started again. I turned up the volume, my heart hammering. That was when I heard it. A voice, soft and soothing. "Hush, little baby. Don't say a word." I stopped breathing. Then came the whispering. "She's such a sweet baby, just like mine was." I felt my hands go ice cold. My vision blurred. The camera feed flickered. For just a second, I saw her. A woman standing over the crib. Her face was hollow, dark eyes sunken deep into her skull. Her hands, gnarled and bony, hovered just above Lily's tiny form. Then, she turned her head toward the camera. She saw me. I slammed the monitor down and sprinted into the nursery, flipping on the lights. Nothing. Just Lily. Safe. Sleeping. But the rocking chair was still moving. The last goodbye. I didn't sleep after that. I spent hours researching, digging through records of the house, trying to make sense of what was happening. I found an old newspaper article, dated back to the 1960s. A woman, Evelyn Carter, had lived in this house. She had lost her baby to illness, crib death, they called it back then. Grief-stricken, she had rocked an empty cradle for weeks, whispering lullabies to a child who was no longer there. Until one night, she took her own life. Her body had been found in what was now Lily's nursery. The next night, Claire and I took Lily and left. We moved out within a week. We never went back. But sometimes, when I'm half asleep, I swear I can still hear it. That slow, eerie lullaby, and a whisper in the dark. Shoo! Don't wake the baby. Whispers in the baby monitor. I don't know how to explain it without sounding insane. Maybe I am insane. Maybe sleep deprivation has finally broken me. But I swear, something is in this house, and it wants my baby. Started small. Little things barely noticeable at first. I'd put Emily, my 6-month-old, down for a nap, and when I checked the monitor, her crib would be empty. I'd rush upstairs, heart hammering in my chest, only to find her tucked neatly in the corner, sound asleep. Too neatly, like someone had moved her with deliberate care. Then there were the sounds. Late at night, I'd hear whispers through the baby monitor. Not static, not the usual electronic hum, actual whispers. I could never make out the words, but the tone chilled me. A murmur of low, hushed voices, like a conversation just out of reach. I told my husband, Mark, but he dismissed it. Baby monitors pick up all kinds of interference, he said. Probably a neighbor's radio or a trucker's CB. I wanted to believe that, but then last Tuesday everything changed. Tuesday, 3:12 a.m. Emily's cries jolted me awake. The baby monitor was on my nightstand, the green light blinking steadily. Her wails were sharp, desperate. I fumbled in the dark, my heart slamming against my ribs. Then, just as I swung my legs over the bed, the cries stopped. Not faded, not calmed. Stopped. Instantly, I grabbed the monitor. On the screen, Emily's crib was empty. I ran. The hallway was dark, but the nursery door was slightly open, a sliver of shadow spilling out. The air was cold. My breath hitched. I pushed the door wider. Emily was there, lying in the crib, her tiny chest rising and falling in deep sleep. But the rocking chair beside her crib, it was moving, back and forth, slow, gentle, like someone had just been sitting there. I slammed my hand against the light switch. The chair stopped. The room was silent except for my ragged breathing. That was the first night I truly felt it. I was not alone. The lullaby. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that chair rocking. I saw the empty crib. I heard the whispers. By Thursday, exhaustion was hitting hard. Mark had started sleeping in the guest room. My paranoia was keeping him awake. I didn't blame him. I was barely functioning. That night, I made a decision. I would stay up, watch the monitor, prove to myself that it was all in my head. The clock hit 2:47 a.m. when it happened. At first, I thought Emily was cooing in her sleep. Soft, rhythmic murmurs. But then I realized she wasn't making the sounds. Someone was singing to her. A lullaby, low, lilting. A woman's voice. The monitor's night vision cast the room in a grainy glow. I stared at the screen, fingers numb with fear. The rocking chair moved. Something was sitting there. A figure. A woman. She was shadowy, featureless, but unmistakably real. Her head was tilted toward the crib, her mouth moving, the lullaby slipping through the speakers. I dropped the monitor. My stomach lurched. I ran. The hallway stretched forever. My legs felt heavy, like I was running underwater. I burst into the nursery. Nothing. Emily was still, her tiny fist curled near her face. The rocking chair was motionless. The room was silent, but the air was wrong. Thick, heavy, a lingering scent of something old, decayed. A whisper brushed my ear. Shoo! She'll wake up. I screamed. The crib. Mark wanted me to see a doctor. You're not sleeping, you're hallucinating, he said. But I knew what I saw. And that night, I knew I couldn't let Emily sleep in the crib. I brought her into our room, placed her bassinet next to my bed. But at exactly 3:12 a.m., she woke up screaming. The monitor was still on. The screen flickered, static hissing through the speaker. Then, a hand, reaching through the crib slats. long fingers curling where Emily had slept hours before. I lost my breath. The figure stood beside the crib, looking down into the empty space, searching. Then its head snapped up. It knew. The screen glitched, the image distorting. The whisper returned. She belongs here. The power cut out. Gone. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't tell Mark everything. I just said I needed to take Emily to my mother's for a while. He argued. I didn't care. I drove, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I swore I saw something in the back seat. We reached my mother's house by dusk. Safe. Finally safe. Or so I thought. That night, I placed Emily in a travel crib next to my bed. The exhaustion swallowed me. I woke up to silence. Too silent. My stomach dropped. I reached for the monitor, turned it on. Emily's crib was empty, and in its place, the baby monitor flickered. The rocking chair in my mother's guest room was moving. A shadow sat in it, rocking, humming, holding something. And as I stared, unable to breathe, unable to move, the whisper came one last time. I found her.